You shouldn't be out on your own at night, little army girl. The leader of the bikers scoffed as Five the Harley-Davidson encircled Sergeant First Class Kira Blackwood, age 32, outside the military supply depot. She had just completed a 12-hour shift teaching elite soldiers hand-to-hand combat, but those motorcyclists were unaware of this. She hadn't even perspired when the five of them were on the ground 60 seconds later. As the Colorado mountain air carried the aroma of diesel fuel and pine across the huge military facility, 32-year-old Sergeant First Class Kira Blackwood secured the doors of the Fort Carson Combat Training Center. The unique patches of the Army Combative School, where she was stationed, were displayed on her outfit. Was one of just 12 expert trainers tasked with instructing soldiers going downrange in close-quarters warfare. The majority of people believe that because of her little 5 feet 4 inches frame, she provided staff with rudimentary self-defense training. They were mistaken. Kira taught Rangers, Special Forces operators, and Green Berets cutting-edge combat skills that may make the difference between returning home safely and arriving in a box. The major supply depot, a huge network of warehouses housing everything from MREs to auto components, was next to the training facility. She would walk the quarter-mile path to the parking lot where her beat was tonight, like she usually does. A Honda Civic stood waiting amidst the lines of military cars. Make sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe before we continue with Kira's amazing story. These unsung heroes deserve their turn in the spotlight, and stories like these deserve to be heard. Since she transferred from her prior post in Germany, the base, which is encircled by Colorado's mountains, has served as her second home for the past 4 years, teaching soldiers how to live when their weapons failed, and their only options were their training, and willpower was what she had discovered to be her calling. Kira's path to becoming one of the most esteemed combative instructors in the Army began in a South Philadelphia boxing gym run by her father, Tony Blackwood, who provided amateur fighters without access to upscale facilities with training. Before a back injury interrupted his competitive career, Tony had won a Golden Gloves title, but he never lost his passion for the fascinating sport of boxing. Kira began mastering speed bag technique and hand-eye coordination in that gym every day when she was 6 years old. These skills would ultimately save her life on numerous occasions. According to her father, fighting wasn't about being aggressive. It involved timing, discipline, and knowledge of how the human body functions under pressure. Her father introduced her to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when she was 14 years old through his buddy Carlos Santos. After leaving the military, the former Brazilian Special Forces operator moved to Philadelphia. Carlos showed her that if you knew anatomy, balance, and leverage, size and power were meaningless. She came to view warfare as a game of chess in which the pieces are bodies rather than pieces. Kira witnessed her parents' financial struggles to pay for her younger brother Marcus' medical care after he was born with cerebral palsy. When she turned 18, joining the military gave her the opportunity to serve her nation and provide for her family. Her instructors noticed something unique about her remarkable performance in basic combat training. Even though she had enlisted with the goal of becoming a military police officer, she was chosen for the combative school after completing rigorous individual training, where she studied for 2 years to teach elite warriors the skills necessary to survive in close quarters. After 8 years of military duty and several combat deployments, she was now 32 years old and had gained respect with her commitment and skill. Earlier that evening, Kira saw a gang of bikers harassing a young private outside the base exchange, which sparked a confrontation. The 5 males, each sporting patches from a nearby motorcycle club that has a reputation for stirring up trouble. The soldier was cornered by military installations, who demanded that he purchase some alcohol using his military discount. She had stepped in at that point, calmly stating that the private needed to go back to his barracks and presenting her instructor credentials. Although the bikers had originally given up, their leader, a man in his 40s with tattoos from prison all over his arms, had made it plain that the fight was far from finished. 3 hours later, she heard motorcycle motors roaring off the warehouse walls as she made her way to her car in the murky light of the depot parking lot. 5 headlights illuminated the area in the dark, forming a semicircle that prevented her route to the car. As he got closer, the commander dismounted first, his steel-toed boots scuffing the tarmac. His friends trailed behind, growing in size and creating a wall of leather jackets and antagonistic intent. They had obviously been drinking, and the combination of their damaged pride and the alcohol had made them return seeking retribution. As they approached her and made remarks about instructing army soldiers to keep their mouths shut, things rapidly got worse. They were strategically positioned. They had selected terrain that favored their numbers and restricted all escape routes. Benefit: they overlooked the fact that Kira had previously encountered similar circumstances in settings with far greater stakes than wounded pride and damaged feelings. She was able to identify the pattern right away. In order to incite their prey to escalate, predators test them for signals of weakness or fear. Kira experienced the usual serenity that always descends when violence becomes unavoidable while she was standing in that parking lot with 5 men who were at least 50 pounds heavier than her. It wasn't boldness or confidence. It was the frame of mind her father had instructed her to use when the conversation turned from words to action. She considered Marcus, who is currently 28 years old and works as a computer programmer. Because of the medical attention, her time in the military had contributed to this. She reflected on the hundreds of soldiers she had trained who were still alive as a result of their recollection of her advice to remain composed under duress. The young private from earlier that evening was the first thing on her mind. In certain ways, he made her think of Marcus, young, defenseless, and attempting to figure out who he is, similar to how the bikers had targeted him. Because they believed he was weak, they were now targeting her because they believed her stature precluded her ability to fight herself. Like body armor, the burden of duty fell on her shoulders. She wasn't only being threatened by these individuals. They were endangering each soldier's safety, who might eventually go this route. They would feel free to keep harassing military personnel if they were successful tonight. As muscle memory from thousands of hours of training took hold, her breathing deepened and slowed. She was reminded by her father's voice that size was a myth and that the one who maintained composure when others lost control was the strongest warrior. Full with potential energy that was just waiting to be released, the moment stretched like elastic. When the leader moved closer and she could smell the booze on his face, the altercation intensified. Breathe and see the obscene tattoos that identified him as someone who had served a considerable amount of time behind bars. The threat in his voice was a result of years of using size and anger to intimidate others. He started outlining the lessons they would be teaching her about respect. They were unaware that every statement was being processed by a person who had received training on how to recognize dangers and react with overwhelming force when called upon. In order to block off any last escape routes and be ready for what they believed would be a simple triumph, the other 4 bikes dispersed farther. Kira took note of their posture, relative levels of fitness, and gait. 2 of them displayed indications of previous wounds that would restrict their range of motion. The third, who was younger, more athletic, and displayed the kind of controlled movement that implied some fighting experience, was unquestionably the most dangerous. Assuming that physical contact would scare her into conformity, the leader made his first error by reaching out to grip her shoulder. Rather, it signaled a change in tone from verbal dispute to physical assault. Her reaction was awful and came right away. She had learned from years of training that when several assailants agreed to violence, the de-escalation window was forever shut. Eliminating the threats as soon as possible was the only remaining course of action. Her shoulder was never touched by the leader's hand. Her surgically precise elbow strike doubled him over and stopped him from breathing properly by catching him in the solar plexus. She had already turned to face the next closest danger before he hit the ground. What transpired was more of a demonstration of what happens when untrained aggression meets expert military training than a battle. The second motorcyclist moved forward, intending to use physical force to subdue her, but found himself in midair as Kira perfectly executed a hip toss, using his momentum against him, sending him slamming into the side of a parked truck. The third assailant paused, abruptly realizing that things weren't going as planned. He lost everything as a result of his reluctance. In 2 swift strides, Kira got closer, her knee striking his midsection hard enough to knock him off his feet. He rolled over backward, unable to breathe. Bikers 4 and 5 attempted to plan their attack, attacking her from several directions at once. But cooperation necessitated communication, and terror had clouded their judgment. Like water, Kira moved between them, using their collision cores to push them into one another as her. Both were dropped by well-placed strikes. From initial touch to the last comatose body striking the asphalt, the entire interaction lasted 57 seconds. Not a single effective blow had been delivered by any of the motorcycle riders. Kira, on the other hand, was barely breathing and was utterly unharmed. Military police sirens screamed in the distance as the dust settled and the cries of vanquished men filled the atmosphere. After hearing the disturbance, someone at the depot phoned security. Still gasping from her first blow, the motorcyclist leader glanced up at, with a mix of hurt and incredulity. He had not met someone who was intimidated for the first time in years, whose abilities, significantly more than anything his scant experience, had equipped him to deal with. 5 riders in varying degrees of consciousness were dispersed over the parking lot when the military police came, and Kira calmly gave a thorough account of what had happened. The entire incident was caught on security footage, which unequivocally demonstrated that she had acted in self-defense against several attackers. Colonel Patterson, the base commander, watched the video firsthand and was astounded by what he witnessed. He had served in the military for 30 years, and he had never seen such a disciplined use of force. The film was made mandatory viewing for incoming instructors of combinations, showing flawless skill in the face of extreme pressure. In a few weeks, Kira received numerous invitations from other installations to host training workshops. Her reputation as a teacher who not only taught skills, but also showed them when necessary grew across the Army combatives community.